Well, good afternoon. I think it's just afternoon. So today I'm going to be talking about this idea of run, change, and transform, which is almost not quite a methodology, but it's a useful way of thinking that we use as we're talking to our clients. So if you look here, there we go. So we look at this pyramid with the run, change, and transform. And it's really thinking about, running your business, what you need to do starting this year to run your business. What about next year? What are you going to do to change your business, change how things operate? And then the year after that, what are you going to do to really start to transform? So just thinking in terms of those 3-year phases, run, change, and transform, it's a useful thing to think about because it makes you concentrate a little bit more on the run stage to get that right. So looking through this in a little bit of detail for the first half, this is where you are. We get a number of people who are early in this. They're about to start that journey, so they're coming to us to see about the run phase, really getting to grips with it. And I'll use this diagram a little bit. What it means is that on the left-hand side there, you're all your customers. And in this situation, you're tending to treat all your customers exactly the same. You don't really know too much about them. But most of their contacts come through in the middle there, come through the phone channel, so there's not a lot of deflection. And then you've got your agents. Again, most of your agents operate on exactly the same basis. There's no different tools or techniques for them. And they've got a set of files, post-it notes, training notes, emails, a whole raft of things they use to try and solve the problem. Now, in terms of managing a call center like this, you're really trying to manage it solely on call data alone. You know how many calls you get, maybe you know the average call time. Probably you've got some tick lists about what the calls are about, but not a great deal more. And then when it comes to trying to optimize or improve that situation, it's a long slog. You've got to have lots and lots of training. You've got to have lots of guys walking around, spotting people in trouble. So that's where you are. You're in a situation where there's plenty of opportunities. So to summarize that, your agents are using a mixture of documents, websites, and so on, and trying to respond to the calls the best way they can. Now, the challenges at this stage are, well, there's quite a lot of challenges at this stage. Typically, you've got ineffective content repositories. You don't know what's up to date. You don't know what's being used. You maybe don't know who owns it. You haven't got much in the way of analytics. You don't know really what's your longest call, what's your least satisfied call, and so on. Maybe not great governance. Can you say who last checked that document was correct? Maybe you're not sure. And when you look at the agent performance, there's the potential for them to be inconsistent, maybe non-compliant, and sometimes just completely off script. So that's your challenge. Also, quite a difficult challenge. It's difficult to introduce change, because everybody's doing the best job they can with all the best will in the world. But to suddenly say, 4,000 agents, I want you to do something different starting tomorrow is a big challenge. On the opportunities side, it's pretty good, though. There'll never be a better time to build a business case in terms of contact deflection, call reduction, reduction repeats, customer sat, all of those things. This is your best time. If you start to do a good job of doing the run phase, that'll be really good. You've also got a big chance to get agent buy-in. They're having a really tough job out there. They're just doing the best they can. And yet, if you give them some tools that make it easier, you can build some real buy-in. And you've also got the opportunity to kind of break down the silos and all the things that are stopping you progress forward. So the next step is to get to that run stage where you're running the business using some decent tools. And what you'll see there is that, again, I'm still treating all the customers broadly the same. I'm doing a bit of automation. Maybe I've got some web self-service, some FAQs to reduce my contact volume. My agents, all pretty much operating the same, but they've got something on the screen, something that'll guide, that'll actually bring up an article, help them find what they're looking for. And at this stage, I've got some extra benefits at the management stage. I can actually look now at what content's being used. Which is the most popular article, which is the one that's rated most. I can look at my agents, who's using the most articles when they answer calls, who's contributing most to that upkeep of those articles. And then when it comes to the optimize bit, I can improve the content. I can work on the articles that are used a lot, make them shorter, make them more reasonable, easier to read, change the tone of voice, and so on. So I'm firmly established in the running phase. I've got the tools to support the use of effective knowledge. I've got some web deflection, single source of knowledge across the whole company, standardized contact, and I've got a knowledge governance program. As soon as something's changed, it's approved, it's changed, it goes out to everybody else. So it's a better situation. So the challenge, and I have to say I don't know what this guy is doing. He's right there in the middle of the slide, but ignore him for the moment, please. But on the run side, this is your biggest challenge area. As you introduce a knowledge base for the first time, you've got to manage that transition. A lot of people end up by saying, well, I've delivered it. Isn't that enough? Well, it's not. Your biggest challenge is the 3 months after you've gone live with the knowledge base. That's when either your agents buy into it or they don't. And they're only going to buy in if you're very responsive, if you're very quick on the changes. So the other opportunities there are that you've got a great opportunity to clean out all your content and your knowledge. So you can establish the knowledge base as the single best place to go, and you can do a complete content refresh. So this little set of blue boxes along the right there, we're basically saying, don't import everything into your new knowledge base. Take the stuff that's really important and create some new knowledge for it. But as much as you can, if you're not sure of it, federate it. In other words, leave it where it is, index it, and present it through the same knowledge base. And that way, as you move forward, sort of iteration by iteration, you can say, right, a lot of that stuff is being used heavily, so I will actually migrate it. I'll improve the content, take it from where it's kept, bring it into the new knowledge tool. But at the end of a few iterations, there's stuff that nobody ever uses. Now, one of our US colleagues said this is the exact way he moved house. He didn't move into the house, he moved all the stuff into his garage. And then for the first 6 months, if he needed something, he went and got it. And after 6 months, if it was still in the garage, he took it, he threw it away. So the crucial thing is that people who build knowledge bases are very good at adding new content. They really don't want to throw stuff away. So you end up with this huge mound of stuff. Okay, so we're in the run. So the next thing is to move to the change area where you're starting to bring a difference. So you see now, I'm trying to treat people slightly differently. I'm trying to make that the interaction I have is based on the actual what I know about the customer. Have they been a customer a long time? What do I know about they've got? So I'm trying to introduce into the conversations thing that will drive it. The other thing I'm going to try and do is I'm going to move from presenting content and knowledge to guiding people through processes, taking them step by step through a proper process. And what that means, because I can then start to think at the process level, I can say which process is the one that is giving me the most issues. How is my process compliant? Are all my agents following the animated processes in the knowledge base? And when it comes to optimizing, there's a ton of stuff I can do here. For every step in the process, I can say, do I already know the answer to that question? Is it somewhere in the legacy tools? Because if so, bring it in. So then I don't need to ask that question of the customer. So I can further increase the process automation. So at this stage, to summarize that, I'm using AI-guided processes, sort of dynamic step-by-step. I've got data integration to make sure that I'm not asking any unnecessary questions. I've got much more improved analytics, because I can think in terms of which process is giving me most of the trouble, which process is giving me the least of the satisfaction. Now, there are some opportunities and challenges at this stage as well. The more you integrate, the more things you bring in, the more stakeholders you get. So there's a slower rate of change. That makes the changes more complicated. And you've also got to manage agent engagement, really key, this one, because you've given them, whether they've been there 1 year or 20 years, you're saying, follow this process because it's the best process. And so agent boredom becomes an issue. I've done this 20 times today. You're asking me to go through it every time. Well, yes, we are, because if it changes, how will you know? So there are some opportunities, though. You've got big opportunities for self-service. You've got things like what some of our customers use called Smart Start. I can start a process, then I can say, actually, I've got to go away and come back later. We can pause exactly where we're on in the process, The next time you call in, whoever picks up the call can go back to that kind of bookmark and carry on from the next question. So that gets rid of the I've got to start again, with every time I talk to somebody. Because you're using a process, you're driving it through a process. Instead of saying, do this on this system and say this while you're doing it, we can actually integrate into these remote process automation tools. And you're trying to get to the point where any agent can handle any call. So third stage, we're trying to get to the transform level. And what's different here is I now want to look at my agents as individuals. I actually want to take the point that if you've been here 20 years, I don't need you to go through exactly the same process. I need to work out, if you're good at these calls, I can give you this process variant. If you're not so good, I'll give you this one. So I'm treating my customers differently through all the data I bring in. I'm using data to improve, to give a different experience as much as I can on every call for the agent. So instead of having the same call 10 times in a day, we will try to make it so it's slightly different, so that they're actually engaged and following it. So now at this stage, I can attempt to manage it in terms of, the process outcomes, which processes aren't giving me the outcomes I want in terms of loyalty or satisfaction. What's the customer experience of those processes? So where can I improve that? And then I want to look at things like, when it comes to optimize, I'm really I know who my best agents are, so I want to get them fully engaged in helping me make the customer experience better and better. So I'm looking at, can we innovate on this process? Can we get you to give me more suggestions? So here, the transform thing, I've taken the AI guidance to another level, so it's personalized for the customer and the agent and the situation. By the situation, I mean, if two calls are coming in, they're identical, one comes in when my call center is extremely busy, then I want to take you through a fast variation of that. If the same call comes in and I've got bags of time, then let's do a bit more explanation. Let's do a bit more upsell or cross-sell. But in other words, I don't need to do it exactly the same way every time. And obviously, I can improve the web self-service, which we'll say more about. So at this level, the transformation side, the challenges are that this agent tool becomes mission critical. In other words, you can't really take effective calls without that tool. That's not so you've got to work out hot standbys and all that high resilience stuff, because you're absolutely relying on this tool to give you the experience you want. And the difficulty is you're doing really, really well at this stage. So it's difficult to maintain that kind of obsession with making things better. Can we make it more useful? Can we improve the experience? So the opportunities are that your agents go from having to follow a rigid framework to being able to have freedom within a framework. And we can engage our high-performing agents to help in that. So this summarizes that kind of first bit. As I go from run to change to transform, when I look at the content execution, I'm going from inconsistent, and then I'm going to consistent, and then I'm actually getting them not just consistent, but actually doing the right thing. At the agent stuff, we've gone from non-compliant to compliant to autonomy within a certain space. And for the kind of company voice, I've gone from potentially off-script to be on-brand, and then a personal experience. So we're getting a decent solution there. So a couple of things now which we're working on. The things that are in the process, they may prove useful, may not. But it's an interesting area for us to be working on. So at the minute, I see there's a couple of gaps as you look at the whole self-service market. There is a gap between self-service and assisted service. So even a not very good agent can sometimes give you a better experience than a fairly decent self-service. So that's one of the gaps that people are trying to close. And obviously, I'll be saying more about our virtual assistant, and there'll be more later on in the day. But then the more obvious one is there's a real difference between your average agent and your best agent. There's a real difference, to me as a customer, between talking to somebody who's really, really very helpful and knows what to do, and somebody who is really very helpful and is an absolute expert in what he's trying to help me with. You know, they'll both probably get the right answer, but the other guy will make me feel a lot better about it. So I'm going to talk about these two systems. So first, let's take the first one, the gap between the web self-service and the customer experience. So let me give you a story about the last time I needed self-service. So, thinking of buying a house, need to go and see a solicitor. So I need to print off, how much money I've got in my savings. So that's no problem. I went to the web and I looked at the stuff, and I suddenly realized it's got my old address. So I need to do a change of address. So that was really neat. I went to the change of address button, and then you've got these really helpful autocomplete tools that fills it out with a brand new address. I save it, print it off. I'm very happy. A simple experience. What I didn't know at the time was that the autocomplete had also auto-completed and changed my email address. Okay? So a few minutes later, when I come in to log in again, suddenly I can't get in. Something's wrong with the login and password. So I thought, well, I tried a couple of times, and all right, bit of a problem. Let's reset my password. And that message, there's nobody with this account we've ever heard of, you know. This account doesn't exist. So I'm thinking, I've lost all my money. You know? So this is the point where I'm thinking, what do I type into a web self-service tool? My account's disappeared. I've lost all my money. I had an account and it's gone. I'm not confident I'm going to get a really good answer. I feel a whole lot better about talking to someone, because there's an element of anxiety here. So I'm going to talk to someone. Right? The person I talked to wasn't really able to help. They said, well, nobody's in yet, but I'll take your details. And anyway, I felt a lot better. I'd shared that problem with someone. And in the end, I sorted it all out. But there are issues where the reason that was a better experience is because even any agent is able to understand what you're trying to do. They can clarify a little bit about the situation. They can help me to start a process, and they can start some sort of escalation. So to do that, and to do it well, you need tools that can do identify intent, you need natural language processing, you need AI-guided process, and you need integration. So there's a whole section on the virtual assistant next. So I'm going to move on to the next area. And this is the area between the kind of like the process worker and the knowledge worker. The agent who's very good and the agent who's exceptional. So one of the things this is a bit like when you've just passed your driving test, or when I just passed my driving test, I was wholly focused on not bumping into all these other cars. If you asked me what I'd driven past, I wouldn't be able to tell you. And that's a bit like what's happening in the call center situation. If you're a brand new agent, you're thinking, right, somebody's telling me a ton of information, and I don't really know what's going on, but I think I'm going to summarize it. So what the experienced agent can do is that they can understand what you're trying to do, they can listen out for sentiment, they can see opportunities to help. So that's what we're trying to do in the call center. So I hinted at we're using speech here. We're trying to see whether they're listening in, initially maybe to the agent side, then maybe listening into the customer side, whether that's going to help us to help the average agent perform as well as the very good one. So here's a real-world situation. I'm on my mobile phone. I can't connect to the internet. So I ring up. I say something. All that stuff on the left-hand side is what I would say. And the agent says, here's all of that, and says, that's a Wi-Fi problem. Okay? So in other words, we throw away a lot of data. But using speech, machine learning, and text processing, I can take that same chunk of text and I can say, okay, the thing to search for is Wi-Fi problem, but I can look at the sentiment, which in this case is fairly neutral. I can work out what the intent is. Clearly, your intent is to solve an internet problem, but also there's a possible complaint in the background there, because there's a mention of it happened before, or it's not working again. So be aware for that. And then if I'm going to solve this problem, I'm going to have to ask a load of questions. Things like, was it working before? Is it working now? What type of system have you got? What are the lights and various things? Turns out that this person has given me all that information. In order to use it, I've got to take the text, and I've got to do some natural language process, and then I've got to throw it into all the different text questions I've got in my AI-guided help. And it'll answer those questions for me so that I can move on a lot faster. And as Ashu mentioned, we can actually do the dialogue, which is interesting, so that you can't pass a step until I've heard you say the thing you're supposed to. So if the thing you're supposed to say is, I'll send you a new one, but there will be a charge. Now, this happened to me, that's what they should have said, but they just said, I'll send you a new one, and clicked the button that said, I told them about the charge. In this case, we can stop them going past that step. Click the microphone and tell me what you're saying. Now, that's obviously maybe a big interest to people in financial services, but for everybody else, there's other things as well. In a call center, you hear people saying, right, you talk through everything you've done in a summary, then you put the phone down and you write that up over the next 20, 30 seconds. Now we can actually record the summary, copy it straight into the call wrap. And it's a great way of taking feedback. It's a great way of capturing the voice of the agent and so on. Okay, so in my last section, I'm going to talk briefly about what we're doing with machine learning. Let's take the same problem. It's a problem I know quite well. We've done this for about 10 or a dozen different telcos over the years. If I can't connect on my to the mobile phone, there's a load of things that could be on the account settings, a load of things on the device, a load of things on the network, things to do with usage, and maybe what apps you're using. There's about 50 generic solutions, but if you bring in all the different configurations and so on, there's a lot more. So what we've done over the years is take that information and build it into an AI-guided flow so that we have a series of dynamic questions. And typically, if you design this, you're going to ask some simple questions first to leave the quick wins. But if that doesn't work, you're going to have to go all the way. And some of these might be 50 to 100 questions to solve it for everybody. So that works. And even a novice agent can be really good. They will solve the problem. But it's a generic solution. It just works in general. However, if you're using a system like that, this gives you fantastic input to machine learning. I've got a very rich feature set. I know exactly what the problem was. I know exactly how it was solved. I know every bit of information that you've passed in from your CRM and everything you've asked the customer. It's perfect for machine learning. So we would take something like a few thousand features, winnow it down to about 40 or 50, and we would push it through a machine learning algorithm to see if it can predict. And it turns out it can predict pretty well. But if there was a problem with one handset, you'd spot it yourself. But if there are 5 or 6 different features, you're not going to spot that with your analytics. But you can do it with the machine learning. So the final thing then is you then still need your AI-guided process, because we start off by doing a few steps, and then we call out to the machine learning. We return its prediction. If the prediction's right, that's the end of the story. We've saved a ton of time. If it's not the right answer, though, and sometimes it won't be, we've got to go back into the AI-guided help and do the remaining steps until we find it. So either way, you're going to save a lot of time. But, so the point about this is you need really rich data, but people who've got it they're going to be the winners. They're going to be the ones who do really well. So there we are. So I'm about downstairs, hovering near the coffee in the AI stand. If you want to come and talk to me about value in 30 days of speech or virtual assistant or machine learning, be very happy to speak to you. All right? Thanks so much for your time.